My name is Sandy Tatum, and I'm here to talk about one of the most remarkable events, golf or otherwise, that anybody ever created. That was the event known as the Crosby. And to understand why the Crosby was such a very, very special experience, you have to have a bit of an introduction, at least, to Bing Crosby. Bing Crosby was a consummate performer with a perfectly wonderful voice, and he had a capacity and a personality so that he made his singing something very, very special. Beyond that, he also was a consummate actor, played in films, and most importantly, with regard to what I'm here to talk about, he had a love affair with the game of golf, which was a consummate factor in his life. Bing played extraordinarily well, and his manifestations of the love affair were very, very impressive. He played well enough, in fact, to qualify to play in the United States Amateur Championship, for which he was accorded a medal. And that medal became an interesting object because his son, Nathaniel, many, many, many years later, not too long ago, won the United States Amateur Championship at the Olympic Club. And in the context of winning that event, he had Bing's medal around his neck and said that he felt like Bing was with him all the way. Bing's consummate skills were very entertaining with regard to playing golf with him, as I did on several occasions. His love affair with the game became manifest right on the first tee, and it manifested itself right through to the 18th green. And there was a very distinct set of characteristics that made that experience very, very engaging. An interesting part of that factor in Bing's life was a relationship that he had with Alistair Cook. Alistair Cook was one of the most interesting, articulate, intelligent, attractive people who ever came over the pike. He did all kinds of things, including putting on a television program on the history of the United States that was an absolute masterpiece. And Bing and Alistair shared something. Alistair was also a lover of the game. And as a consequence, Bing was in Spain playing in a golf event when he died. And on the day before he died, he sent Alistair a postcard, which Alistair obviously received after he had died on the next day. And in the postcard, Bing described how miserably he had played golf that day, but went on to finish the postcard with saying, "Alistair, I will never surrender." And that was a characteristic of Bing's, and it also reflected a lot about not just his life, but also his golf game. Playing with him had a very special factor involved in it. There was something about Bing's personality that was so very, very engaging that it added dimensions to the whole experience. I can remember, for example, playing a round of golf with him at Cypress Point. It was a perfectly beautiful day, and Cypress Point is one of the most interesting, effective, remarkable golf experiences you could have anywhere. And I happen to remember that as we were leaving the 14th tee, walking down the path, I was walking along behind him, and Bing started to whistle. Bing's whistle, just like his voice, was absolutely engagingly attractive and right on tune. And the combination of walking along behind Bing Crosby on the 14th hole at Cypress Point, listening to him whistle, added something else to the experience that I was enjoying so thoroughly. His love affair with the game got very, very effectively manifested by his creation of the Crosby. The Crosby, in a word or two, was the most interesting and enjoyable and satisfying golf event in which I personally have ever played. And I may say, as I sit here, I've been playing the game for 85 years. And it stands out to this day as an experience that had no counterpart. The basic reason for that was the fact that Bing's personality was all over it. It was another manifestation of his love affair with the game. He created this Pro-Am event back in the 40s, early 40s, I believe. And he set it up as two events, really, at least for the pros. The pros played one event, and the pro-amateur duo played a better ball event. So there were two prizes for the pros and one for the amateur, if the amateur had the incredible experience of winning the event. And I have to say, having introduced that subject, that I won it. I was the winning amateur in the early 60s. And I played with a young pro from the East. We prevailed, and indeed we were 36 under par, our best ball, which in that time was the record in the event. And Bing at the Clambake, about which I will comment shortly, Bing at the Clambake presented me with a trophy, which is a wonderful, beautiful, huge trophy. And if Barbara would let me, I'd put it on the mantelpiece in the living room and have a spotlight on it. But in any event, I have it in a very prominent place, and it lives with me to this day as one of the most engaging experiences I've ever had playing the game all these 85 years. Bing started the event at Rancho Santa Fe before the war. And after the war, an inspiration took hold for a number of people to bring the event to the Monterey Peninsula and basically center it in Pebble Beach. And so the Crosby got started in a way that developed into one of the most engaging, attractive experiences you could possibly imagine, playing golf. And it had all over it Bing's personality. The personality involved a relaxed, engaging, thoroughly interesting human being. First time I played in it, 1957, happen to remember, because it was such a remarkable experience in my life. In those days, the field played three courses. Played Cypress Point, played the Dune course at Monterey Peninsula, and played Pebble Beach. There was no cut in those days, just the 3 rounds. All of the field played all of the rounds. Bing paired me with his very, very close friend, who's an amateur, Phil Harris. Now, Phil Harris was a marvelous comedian and a wonderful actor and a very, very special human being, and his relationship with Bing was quite extraordinary. And to be out there for 3 days with Phil Harris added huge dimensions to one of the most interesting golf experiences I've ever enjoyed. Bing attracted a professional field that was one of the best professional fields of golf anywhere, because the pros loved him and loved playing in his event, and especially loved playing the courses on the Monterey Peninsula. And so the event became a huge, huge, huge success. And the people who were privileged to play in it, such as I, had experiences that had no counterpart anywhere else, not just in life, but not just in golf, but in life. And it's most important, I think, to understand the impact that that event had on the Monterey Peninsula. In the first place, it was played in the month of February, as I recall it, a month when the tourism was almost negligible and when the economic activity in this area was very, very, very slow. And it attracted very large fields and a very large number of spectators, so that the economic impact directly in Monterey was really very, very important. But way beyond that, it had media coverage that was absolutely stunning. And it got television coverage and media and press coverage so that the Monterey Peninsula, and especially Pebble Beach, got an identity that you've got to add up as being totally priceless. I need to be sure that the whole picture of what an important, fascinating event the Crosby was was something that was so much a part of Bing and so unique that it deserves very, very special mention, and that is the so-called Clambake. The whole field that played in the Crosby, it occurred on Sunday night, and in those days, the pros weren't going anywhere, so they all were just stayed around, certainly for the Clambake. It had the whole field that had played in the Clambake, but beyond that, it had all of the volunteers that had been so important factors in causing the Crosby to be so effectively administered. It was in the county fairgrounds, and there were several hundred people. And what happened in the Clambake was that Bing put on a very, very personal party. And he had a cast of characters that participated in putting it on. They included, centrally, Phil Harris, whom I identified earlier and who had such a very, very engaging, interesting personality and relationship with Bing. But he also got Les Brown and his band of renown, and he got Rosemary Clooney, and they put on a perfectly spontaneous, perfectly wonderful set of entertainment factors that has to add up for me to one of the most engaging, interesting evenings that I've ever spent anywhere. One of the factors that made the whole Crosby scene so very, very engaging was it included Bob Hope. And Bob Hope, as you all know, had very significant characteristics as a person and as a comedian, and he lit up the sky everywhere that Bob Hope turned up. And he certainly did so at the Crosby. And the lighting up of the sky took on added dimensions because the relationship between Bob Hope and Bing Crosby was so very, very interesting and effective that the two of them together, the whole was much greater than the sum of the parts, even though the parts were as special as each of those people were. He participated centrally in the Clambake and added his own inimitable features and touch to what went on in that marvelous event, and added something to it that was uniquely Bob Hope's, and which had in it the relationship he had with Bing that was so very, very interesting and engaging. And so it is that I am wonderfully privileged to have known Bing Crosby and to have had that friendship get me into his golf event and to have had the experiences that I had playing in that event. I first played it in, as I say, 1957. I played it right straight through until it became the AT&T, and I played it for 40 years. And what a set of experiences those were for me.